Greg, today we talk about Qualia Resilience, the new product by Neurohacker. And I like the subtitle of it. It says Neuroadaptogen Formula, Thrive Under Stress. And I think many people are stressed these days. So can you tell us the story? How did you come up with the idea of creating Qualia Resilience?
Sure. So you're right. I mean, stress is, since I've been in the health world, so going back to, I went to naturopathic school in the mid to early 90s, but stress has always been big. It was big in the military in my first career. And I think that it's actually, even more people today would say, I feel stressed compared to what has historically always been a high number of people. And when we were doing this, we wanted to support stress, but, first and foremost, we're known for Qualia Mind. We're a cognitive company at our heart. And so what we really wanted to do was a combination of ingredients that would support stress, but help people think better at the same time. Because one way to go about stress is just to do really relaxing things. But that's almost anti-nootropic if you think about it, right? Like you can do so much relaxation that you sacrifice drive and some of the higher brain functions. So our goal for Qualia Resilience was to do the stress piece well, but in a way that allowed people to think clearly to perform at their best. So essentially create a combination stress without sacrificing nootropic, and ideally to have a nootropic benefit. So that guided our decisions of ingredients, how much to use, what to pick, things like that.
And Neurohacker is usually doing a beta program, right, where they send out the new products to 100 people or so. Can you give us any insights of what were the results of this beta program? What benefits did you notice?
Sure. So one of the things I love about Neurohacker Collective is that before we would ever put a product on the market, I've taken it personally. And then after I feel like, this is safe, it seems to be doing what I expect it to do, then we'll do some type of a pilot study with our beta community. And so we did that for Qualia Resilience. We gave people a month's supply to take. And some of the things that we saw, so first and foremost, we used a standardized questionnaire that's about mental toughness, because fundamentally at the heart of stress is how resilient we are, but a lot of resiliency when it comes cognitively is that sense of being tough mentally. And so we saw, and I can pull up the exact number because I don't want to misquote it, but for that mental toughness questionnaire, what we saw was a almost 40% improvement over a month in how people felt about their mental toughness and answered a standardized questionnaire. But then we also asked about other things like, some people's perceptions of stress. So that decreased. We asked about specifically, like, how resilient do you feel? And we saw a more than 50% increase in people's self-rated resilience over that. We asked about burnout. So burnout's almost the flip side of that. We saw a 30% reduction in burnout. And then we also asked about things like, do you feel like you're calmer? So again, we saw a calmer mood. So it really, every area that we emphasized for the product in our pilot study, we saw across the board, people scored really well in those areas. So bottom line is we were excited enough about those results that we launched the product.
Awesome. Can you tell us a bit about the formulation of Qualia Resilience? How did you come up with the formula? What are like the top ingredients and why did you choose them?
Sure. So I want to start with one I think the audience probably is less familiar with, and that's called Extramel. It comes out of a French company. And the backstory is, I believe it was in 1989. Farmers selling this specific cantaloupe, like a type of melon, into markets, noticed that this particular variety of cantaloupe had crazy long shelf life compared to what would be normal, like weeks longer, where normally cantaloupe is fairly, days to a week. And so that kind of jump-started the question of, well, why? What is it about this one variety of cantaloupe melon that gives it incredible resilience, right? And what they eventually found is it had a lot higher amounts of antioxidant enzymes, but specifically things like superoxide dismutase. So we'll just use SOD from now, but it had higher amounts of that and some other antioxidant enzymes than other cantaloupes. And the reason that's important is when you think in the plant kingdom, antioxidant defenses are kind of at the heart of their ability to be resilient to their environment. So it's what they do, well, one of the many things they do, polyphenols would be another, to build up their resistance. And as it turns out, in humans, and especially more at a cellular or mitochondrial level, one of the commonalities of any type of stress response is that our cells and mitochondria beef up their antioxidant defenses. Because no matter what the cause of stress, at a cellular level, almost all of the variety of different stresses that we would be exposed to create oxidative stress, right? So that's part of the story, right? Okay, there's this great variety of melon, crazy shelf life, really resilient to environmental stress. Well, what would happen if you made an extract and gave it to humans? Because at the end of the day, that's what really matters, right? It's the stories are nice, the biochemistry and physiology is nice, but what's the qualia of it? What's the subjective or objective response? And so at the end of the day, that's what really jazzed me about using Extramel. There's been a couple of fantastic human studies, specifically measuring the things that resilience is about for us. So, and the other thing I like when studies is typically the longer duration, the better. Because especially when it comes to stress, adaptogens, adapt is the key thing, right? Sometimes you'll see something work really well for a week, but over a month or 2 months or 3 months, we've adapted, not so good. So Extramel has, both a month-long study and then another study, I want to say it was 84 days, so encroaching up on 3 months. And it just rocked for things like mental and physical fatigue, for sleep, for perceptions of stress. So across the board, every area that I would think is most important to me personally, if I was working with someone that was really feeling stressed out, Extramel helped. And it helped progressively over time, meaning the results were better the longer that people took it. So I just think this is a completely underused and underknown ingredient, and was super excited to include it in Qualia Resilience.
Awesome. Are there any other ingredients you're excited about, you want to talk about?
So the other ingredient that I would say is again, something at Neurohacker Collective we're really excited to introduce to the market, is a new form of ashwagandha called Nooghanda. Mm-hmm. So NOO, think of nootropic. So this is the cognitive ashwagandha. And we're at Neurohacker Collective big fans of ashwagandha. We use KSM 66 in Qualia Night. We use Sensoril in Qualia Life. So these are also excellent forms of ashwagandha. But one of the things that can happen with ashwagandha for some people, and you'd see this if you went into like the nootropic subreddits, is that for some people when they take those, again, excellent ashwagandhas, they experience it as almost too calming. So like the way I would think about it, for some subset of people that take ashwagandha, like again, these, clinically studied ones, it's a bit like kryptonite for motivation. So that would be the thing that would come up, again, not for everyone, but enough that we were like, oh, well, that's not what we want for this product. We don't want it to be that calming that we've essentially, sapped motivation for people. And so what excited us about Nooghanda is the company that created it had essentially recognized that problem and decided, okay, we want to create an ashwagandha extract that has the anti-stress things, but removes some of the things that are more sedating. And then their emphasis in studying it, they've done 2 studies to date. One was an acute study, a cognitive study, and then one was a 30-day cognitive study. So again, for our purposes, the nootropic ashwagandha or Nooghanda, we just felt was a better fit. But again, like these other ashwagandhas are great for stress. We just didn't feel like for something where we didn't want to potentially be too calming, sap motivation, Nooghanda was the clear best. And again, we're, at least as far as I know, in discussing things with the supplier of this, we're one of the first brands that's going to be introducing Nooghanda to the public. So super excited to share it with our customers.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you have these different versions of the same ingredient that then also has a different effect on you.
Yeah, it's why I think for different extracts, depending what compounds or even plant parts they focus on. So even KSM 66 only uses the root. Sensoril uses a root and leaf. The Nooghanda also uses a root and leaf. So, and then the other thing about Nooghanda is it's a liposomal, so to enhance bioavailability of it. So again, really cool ingredient. And then what we wanted to do was have a combination of adaptogens. So just for the audience, when I think of adaptogens, and this is an oversimplified story because they do way more than this, but so the heart of the term adaptogen is this idea of adapting. And I think to put it in the correct frame of reference, it can be helpful to think about stress as there's specific stress, right? So if you and I decide, okay, let's make a commitment. We're going to run a marathon 6 months from now and train for that. Like that's a specific stress. Like no doubt about it, a marathon's stressful, but we're going to train in a really specific way to build up our resilience to that form of stress, right? So there's specific adaptation, but then there's what's called non-specific adaptation. So if instead of training for a marathon, you and I said, okay, well, over the next 6 months, let's just build our fitness. We'll cross-train, we'll do other lifestyle things because we want to become as fit and resilient across the board. So no matter what type of stress we encounter, we'll be better able to perform. So we won't be able to run the marathon as well, but we're trading that off to have a broader ability to respond. And what adaptogens do is they excel at that non-specific adaptation to stress. So adaptogens of all type, but we had mentioned ashwagandha, but another one would be Eleutherococcus. So Eleuthero is the short name for it, and it used to be called Siberian ginseng. I think in Europe it still might be. In the US, there was a farm bill passed back, I think around 2004, that made it so you can only use the ginseng name with something that's panic species, right? So now Eleuthero, but Siberian ginseng, if you looked on PubMed or research. And Siberian ginseng, again, I love the backstory of it. So Siberian ginseng was really something that the former Soviet Union, their scientists identified and did most of the research. And the reason was they were looking for things that would both help their military, their astronauts, and their athletes to perform better. And they did, all of those had in common really stressful environments and stressful either training or, exposures. And they, at that point, so this was the late 50s, Panax ginseng was well known. So that would be like Asian or Chinese or Korean ginseng. It goes by different names, but that was harder to get. And so what they decided to do is, well, let's look in that same family, so families above species on the hierarchy. In that same species, if there's other plants that had a reputation in their traditional medicines for that, and that led them to Eleutherococcus senticosus. And that was much more available because it grew in Siberia, it grows in Korea, it grows in northern China. And over from, say, 1958 to 1982 or so, there was more than 1,000 studies done on Siberian ginseng in the Russian literature. Now, most of that's never been translated directly, but reviews of it have been. And Siberian ginseng, in a lot of ways, for at least what we would think of as an adaptogen, was better than Panax ginseng. And again, I love Panax ginseng, but Siberian ginseng, especially for that mental component, energy, mental fatigue, and physical fatigue, Siberian ginseng was a really robust adaptogen. So that's why we added that in, because it's we believe that a combination of adaptogens can support areas broader than a single one necessarily can. So that led us to that. And then the other one that was really a centerpiece is Tulsi, so holy basil. And holy basil is out of the Ayurvedic tradition, but again, it would have been thought of almost as a mental clarity and stress. Traditionally, it had that combination. And the other thing we really liked about it as the Neurohacker science team is that holy basil and ashwagandha are routinely used together within Ayurveda. So we felt like they're almost their energetic qualities out of that system of medicine indicate that they're just a great combination to use together. And then the last herbal adaptogen we put in was ginger. And I've probably said this dozens of times to people around Neurohacker, but if I could only have one plant on a desert island that I was stranded on, ginger would be it, right? It just does a lot of great things, everything from like digestion, but I think of it as probably the best gut-brain adaptogen. And the other thing with ginger, it tends to be a bioenhancer in the same way that something like piperine would be, right? It tends to help other compounds be better metabolized and absorbed. So we felt like having a little bit of that in complements these other herbs. So that's kind of like the botanical suite. But then we have a few other things. Before we get to those, I know you're really smart about adaptogens. I was wondering if you had any questions or comments.
I was generally wondering, because we mentioned a lot of ingredients that have an effect on the brain, on the mind, on the mental aspect. And obviously one of your top sellers is Qualia Mind. And I would generally be wondering, can you take both products together, or how do these different compounds, act together?
So one of our goals was to make it so that Qualia Resilience would be friendly with any of our other existing products currently. That said, Qualia Mind has a really robust stress stack in it. It's got, rhodiola, bacopa. So in a way, what we tried to do was choose things that aren't in Qualia Mind so that someone could stack these more comfortably together and be getting adaptogen support that wouldn't exist in that. So I guess short answer is I feel like for most people, Qualia Mind actually gives a robust amount of stress support, but that Qualia Resilience is completely stackable with it.
Yeah, I would agree, because I take Qualia Mind caffeine-free regularly, and I feel it definitely also boosts resilience, but definitely has also a strong focusing effect, which I think you don't have with resilience. So resilience is more focused on that resilience part, right?
Right. Yeah. It's so I think one of the things that we've seen is that there's, think of most people that want to do a nootropic, their main goal would be something like focus, concentration, attention, getting in the flow. But and for the majority of those people, for lack of a better way to describe it, doing things to support mental energy is the key thing. And then neurotransmitters like acetylcholine and dopamine. So Mind was made to do that. But there's also a subset of people that what they need to get into that kind of focused state is actually almost just a little bit of calming added in. So coffee wouldn't be the ideal thing for them. That's something that added just that calming is going to then bring everything more centered and focused. And so, L-theanine would be the classic, nootropic ingredient that you see used for that a lot. Ashwagandha is, again, stacked commonly with that in the nootropic community. So that's the route that we went. So L-theanine is another ingredient. It's shared in both Mind and Resilience, but it's because it allows that, essentially what I think of as clean energy, like that calm focus. And so, when I've taken Qualia Resilience as an example, I've experienced some of the same overall day-long benefits that I would get with Qualia Mind. And the key thing I look for personally is, do I hit a wall or need a nap at 2 p.m? A good nootropic for me should be something I can take early in my day, but keeps me productive all through the afternoon. So I'm not as concerned what happens a half hour or hour after I'm taking it. I'm looking for what's happening 4, 6, 8 hours down the road. And Qualia Resilience stacked up really well for me personally there.
So now we talked a lot about supplements and the supplement Qualia Resilience, and I think it's important for people to understand that it's a supplement for a healthy lifestyle, right? So maybe you have some suggestions what people can do to also increase their resilience without, taking supplements. What would be like one or two things that you think people can do independently or also together with Qualia Resilience to, improve their whole mental state and their resilience?
So I could give a long list, but
just like the top two, please.
But my top two. So my first one would be what I call paced breathing, but Neurohacker's recently been taking Divine's course on, basically stress. And I think they might call it, they had a different name for it, but by paced breathing. So breathing is probably the quickest avenue to go from being stressed out to like balancing our nervous system, that fight or flight. And what I've used personally, but also used when I was in practice, was just a really simple technique where you breathe in for 5 seconds, breathe out for 5 seconds, and almost imagine that the breath's coming from this area, like in and out. And when most people do that, it naturally becomes more diaphragmatic breathing. So about a 5-minute session of just breathing in 5, breathing out 5, often will really make a immediate difference on our nervous system, shifting from that more fight or flight mode to more relaxed mode. So that'd be one, because we can do that anywhere. I mean, I've done it.
And I would throw in box breathing as well,
Yep.
very similar to what you described, just with the breath hold in between.
Yeah, I think I view box breathing as maybe a little bit more alerting, like when you need to, calm, but also kind of get a boost. But they're both great techniques. So, yeah. And then the other thing, I would just use the word subtract. So, like my view is that everything is stress. Like some stress is, like an adaptogen making us fitter. But, everything at the end of the day, stress summates. So if we're already feeling stressed and overwhelmed, by almost definition, that means we have too much on our plate. And so the key thing is figuring out what we can subtract, and what I've generally seen people wanting to do, and what I would have done in my younger days, is like, rather than subtract, but what other thing can I add, right? Oh, like I heard Tai Chi was good, so I'm going to do Tai Chi, right? That's not what we want, right? When we're stressed, we want to subtract. And I think the biggest thing to subtract would be things that cause our brain to ruminate. So things that are recurrent thoughts. So like as an example, I tend to think our brain, I use the word bandwidth, but we only have so much bandwidth to go around. And if we're consuming it with this repetitive ongoing conversation, like something simple, should I shave my head or no? Should I give these clothes away or no, right? Those are low level, but that's consuming some of our bandwidth. So we want to subtract, and often subtracting means saying no, getting rid of something, doing something that we were afraid to do, right? So anyways, that would be the key idea, subtract. And then awesome. I think the last thing, because I'm gonna cheat and have one more, would be the stories we tell ourselves. So this is pretty clear from neuroscience and human behavior research, but they'll often use the word optimist and pessimist or things like that. But at the most foundational level, each of us is constantly telling stories inside our head to ourselves. Maybe there's a few exceptions, but in general, we're telling stories. And often the stories are causing us stress and anxiety. And if we can shift our story, that will make a huge difference. So like as an example, when I was in naturopathic school, I was in the first class at a naturopathic school from 93 to 96. So at the midway point, we had to take basic science as national boards. And we had no frame of reference for anyone before us in the school having passed them, since we were a new class. So most of my classmates were really stressed out, like, are we going to be ready? And so, like, a few asked me, like, why aren't you stressed? I'm like, oh, I'm going to pass them. Like, my story is really simple. Like, I'm going to prepare, I'm going to pass them the first time, end of story, right? Like, where most of my classmates, their stories were like, oh, is the school preparing us? Are we going to be ready? Like, at the end of the day, like, I always say my story was more resourceful, right?
Yeah, the mind is a powerful tool, but a bad master. So you got to use it as your tool.
Yeah. So anyways, that was 3, but some type of breathing, especially in the moment, and then figuring out what things you can subtract, because the truth is time is probably our most scarce resource. So we want to guard that jealously, and then you make sure that the things we're subtracting aren't for our own benefit, but subtract things if we're feeling stressed, and know that we have permission to do that, right? Like we're not a bad person for saying no or subtracting things. And then the last, like I said, become better storytellers.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much for your insights and for sharing everything you know about Qualia Resilience.
Yeah, that was just the tip of the iceberg. We also have magnesium, B vitamins, vitamin C, bioflavonoids. Like I said, we're very proud of it, and we think it's a robust solution for a world that's increasingly feeling very stressed.
I hope you enjoyed this interview on Qualia Resilience. And if you want to try out Qualia Resilience, you can go to neurohacker.com, order the product, and get 15% off with my coupon code MAXHACK. And you can also choose a subscription of this product, so you will get a special price and 50% off the first month minus 15% with my coupon code MAXHACK. So I think that's a really good deal to try this product out. And if you want to see more biohacking videos and product reviews, check out my YouTube channel and subscribe. I'm sending you much love from Switzerland.